Good evening, everyone. It's a few minutes after 7, and Rosie has asked us to try and stay on time tonight, so I'm just trying to follow instructions and keep everything rolling. My name's Jeff Sloan, for the people who haven't met me, and I'm moderating the event tonight. And just wanted to give you a bit of the background into tonight's event and why we're doing this at this time. About a year and a bit ago, the people in the Newburgh Centreville Pastoral Charge had a number of meetings, brainstorming meetings, to kind of look at church renewal and bring new life into the church, sort of post-COVID, as most organizations suffered a little bit during the COVID pandemic. We thought this was an opportunity to kind of look at what we're doing, maybe think about some new things we could be doing, and to try and bring more connections between the church and the community outside of the church. And so one of the ideas that we came up with, the brainstorming, was to have some speaking events. And so here we are a year or so later, having our first event. And we're very pleased to have all of you out this evening on a busy week before the Holy Week, and Easter and Good Friday approaching. And we're very grateful to have some wonderful people to join us up here this evening to talk about issues of leadership, which we recognize is a huge issue in our community and in society at large right now. All one has to do is look south of the border to see where the leadership issues are creating a great deal of consternation in the country and globally. And as our population ages, the needs for vulnerable populations become larger and larger as more of us end up in nursing homes and in isolation in the community. So the committee, the little group that got together to plan for this evening, really invited some key leaders from the community to come out tonight to talk about the issues of leadership, particularly with vulnerable populations, as we thought this was an issue that was important that we needed to address, and also to look at how to encourage young people to become involved and to become leaders in the community. So I think that's the background for this evening's event. We're going to have an opportunity for questions from everyone out there, and we also have some prepared questions that we have circulated to our speakers tonight. So we're going to start off with the prepared questions, and then we're going to invite all of you out there to write down your questions on little pieces of paper that I think are there in the pews. And then Jeff is going to collect those at a certain point, and we'll pose them to our speakers as well, and hopefully get a good discussion going about leadership and vulnerable populations. So I'd invite our panelists to come forward, and I'll just introduce the folks we have with us tonight. This is Sue Weir, who is the Executive Director of the Lennox and Addington Interval House. Monica Cook from Ongwanada Hospital is the chaplain there, and as many of you know, has had a connection with Newburgh Centreville Pastoral Charge for many years, and is also the former youth counselor at
NDSS,
yes. Amongst other hats that she's worn over the years. And Kevin Alkenbrack, as many of you know also, is the director of the mission in Napanee, and is very active in the community, has been for many years. Morningstar mission does a tremendous amount of outreach to people who are on the edges of our community, people who are vulnerable and have issues with low income. And we've been discussing with Kevin actually somewhat over the last couple of months about possibly extending the meal program that is available there into our community. So we're extremely pleased to have all three of you here with us this evening, and very grateful that you've taken time off of your busy schedules to spend this evening with us. So welcome to everybody. Now, we've also circulated the biographies of each of our speakers through the church as well. So if you're interested to read more on the background of each of our speakers tonight, feel free to pick that paper up. It also has the agenda on the program. So we're going to start with the pre-distributed questions, and perhaps we'll pose these questions to all three of you initially, and then if it looks like we're running out of time, we'll be more selective with the questions and direct them to individuals, if that's all right with you. Okay? So, first question that we have here is that we're here tonight to understand more about how we can nurture future leadership. And the question is, why is good leadership especially important when working with vulnerable communities? Maybe we'll start with you, Sue. Is that all right?
Sure. I don't know how you want the technology to go. There we go.
Just bring that forward a little bit.
I like to lead as far back as I can, stay away from as much as I can. I think in terms of thinking about future leadership, one of the challenges is really trying to help young people develop a real appreciation for some of our vulnerable populations. I think some of the challenges in vulnerable populations is, for a number of reasons, there isn't always great affinity for working alongside folks who are experiencing complex mental health needs or complex addiction issues, or in the work that I do, who are experiencing domestic violence. And I think that really creates a little bit of a void and a vacuum for people early on in their careers when they're thinking about, when I see myself as a high school student or a college student or a young university student, is that work that I'm called to? And I think there's been, over the course of time, work that people are called to, and I think that some great leaders are born out of that, and others are born out of interesting circumstance. They just find themselves in the work and really have affinity for it. But I think there's lots of pressure and lots of direction for people to, really look at careers that are going to generate good incomes and generate, kind of prestige and those sorts of things. And I don't know that always when we're thinking about vulnerable populations that that's what people think about. And I think that really is a launching point for people, is how do we create a light to put on folks who are in vulnerable populations that says this is really worthwhile work, that this work is worth doing, that being present for individuals regardless of the circumstance in that moment of time is a real privilege and a real honor and a real opportunity to really have an impact in their lives. And I think that isn't always clear, and particularly for young leaders. I think that's really a challenge, and I think that's a place where we really can do lots of leadership development, is to really help people understand that we all have a role to play, right? We all have an opportunity to make difference in people's lives, and it's not just about your work being driven by kind of a prestigious opportunity, but also about lots of opportunities that don't seem prestigious, but really are privilege and honor to be present. To sit with someone who's going through a really difficult time and to hear their story and to hear what's going on and to understand how you can be helpful to them is a really significant grace in order to be able to do that, and to have that opportunity is really valuable. And I think if we could foster that among young leaders and help them understand how important that is, I think that would really create the next generation of leadership. Because unfortunately, I think we have lots of leadership that is my age and a little further up the chain, which is heading rapidly towards retirement. We're going to have a huge exodus of people out of leadership positions, where how we get those roles filled and how we get people who are committed to the work and care about the work, I think is really a real challenge going forward, and fostering that among youth and among folks who are 20 or 30 or 40 years left in their career. I think that's really where we need to do some great work in terms of getting people to come to the table to say this is important work and we need to get excited about it and we need to want to do it. So that's my 10 minutes.
So I would say that that as I look around the room, probably Sue spoke well to kind of where the young people themselves are maybe at and the challenges that they face. But I was in lead training the other day. Many people in our organizations were at the lead training, which is a lot of social agencies come together and just get to network and talk about mental health. And the speaker talked about, I'll probably get the numbers a little bit off, but something like there's 1.6 million people in, I don't know if it's Canada or Ontario, that are 65, and that in 4 years that number will be something like 3.4 million will be 65. So there is a rapid transition that is coming in our economy, and so as I look around the room, I would maybe say to the people that are sitting here, if you are working or you're involved in things, you should probably look around to see who is 20 and 30 and who you might be able to pass on some of your wisdom to, because there is probably some pain coming to the economy when we really see the baby boomers start to step aside. Because I think we've seen a lot of people stay in the job market, and so I do think that it's incumbent on each one of us to really think about what wisdom we can impart and remind people, because we have seen some things, and people have come out of COVID, kids have come out of COVID, and anybody who knows people who are in university in the last few years, it can be quite a challenge. And so these people are coming out and going into the workforce, and in the social services field, it's often lower pay. It can be very traumatic work sometimes, but it is super rewarding. And I think that it's going to be really important for the senior people who are doing these jobs to really be intentional to invest in young people and to really tell the story of why this is really important.
Good points, and now I'm number 3, so I'm...
Start with the next time.
Oh, yeah. No, you don't have to start with the next time. You know, our vulnerable communities are at a disadvantage, and quite often, I work in the developmental services sector. It's no fault of their own. Circumstances in their life or, just challenges that they have. And I think, as we nurture leaders, we have to be people that recognize, first of all, the contribution that people can make in our society. Sometimes we devalue the significance and the contribution that I speak specifically about people with developmental disabilities can make in our society. So I think that's one important thing for us to carry forward. And good leadership are leaders where everyone is welcome at the table. And if there's barriers that prevent people from being a part of the group or part of the gathering, that we think through and acknowledge what those barriers are and see what we can do to fix them.
Thank you. Some very interesting points there, and especially that last one, Monica. Thank you for raising that. And we recognize that in our public buildings as well, we have some accessibility issues, which we're actually looking at that issue right now here. And Centreville, our sister congregation up in north of here, has already addressed that and has put an elevator into their building. So these heritage buildings, though, do represent significant challenges for access. Our second question, and maybe we'll start with Kevin this time. Each of us has some connection and possibly some influence with the young people finding their way in the working world. If you could tell us about your career path to your present role and what people or ideas or experience influenced you, and how did that influence your life to this point? That could take a whole long time, so
Well,
we may have to cut you short.
Yes.
Just the Coles notes.
Just the Coles notes. Okay. So, so I would say that Sue mentioned that sometimes people find themselves in positions, and so there's no doubt about it that I had a sales career that was going along, and anyway, to make a long story short, I felt called. I thought that I heard that I was supposed to serve the poor. And so I didn't really know what that meant, other than I was already involved at Morningstar on the weekends doing dishes. And so, so I just went to Deacon David at the time, who was the founder and was running Morningstar, and I just said, I think I'm supposed to serve the poor. And I used to think that the poor are all in Africa, but I'm already here, so what could you do with me if I gave you my working time? And I said that I needed 2 years to leave my jobs. I worked for Cartronics, a family business, and I said I can't just leave them. And so we talked. It turned out he had been praying for what was going to happen to Morningstar, and it was really just a Saturday supper and a Wednesday lunch with a little bit of drop-in time, and David was doing some taxes on the side. And so he said, well, I've been praying, God put it on my heart that we should, what to do with Morningstar. I'm approaching 65. And he said, well, here you are. So he said, I'll mentor you for 2 years. So first of all, I would say that Deacon David was a huge influence on me. And he was anybody who knows him, he knew what he thought was right, and he just moved forward trying to do what he thought was right. And so that has that really was stamped on to me to try to move forward and do what you think is right. And so that doesn't mean that everything you do is right, but it is important, I think, to have principles. And to stand for something. I think that's really important, especially serving the vulnerable people, because we know that the community has many different ideas of how we should serve the poor and maybe why people are poor. And so he taught me, and many people taught me, that one of the roles at Morningstar is that we have to change the hearts and the minds of the community. And both of the panelists here have talked about that's really important. We have to, that it is easy for people who are vulnerable to be forgotten about. And we're all busy, and we all have families, and we all have houses, and we all have retirement to think about. And yet, if you look at the charitable economy, it's bigger, I think it's bigger than most of the other economies that we think, or the other industries that we think are the big industries. And actually, the volunteer sector and the charitable sector actually drive the economy in ways we don't even realize. So maybe I'll just stop there because other people have important things to share.
Doesn't matter. I think when I think back in my career path that has led me to where I am today, I would say I started out in a career that was probably far more lucrative than the career I've ended up in, which I think is probably true for most people in our leadership roles. But that certainly was a little bit of an eye-opener, because one of the things you can't necessarily leverage yourself into bed for is a paycheck. Not that I am paid, I'm not saying I'm not. But I think from there I went into working in a community agency. I worked as an outpatient addictions clinician, and one of my colleagues at that time was a very charismatic woman who really saw the joy in working with clients, and really emboldened that notion that, you know what, even in the darkest of days, even in the worst of times, even in, you know, the stories that you don't even really want to think about that you've heard, there's still pieces of joy and there's still silver linings. And I think that for me was something that was really transformational, was realizing that, again, putting a human face and a person in the place of a story, or in place of what would have been a treatment plan or a provision of care, really seeing the person and really seeing that person as an individual and realizing that you're just really working with them in one little sliver of their lives in one moment in time. And I think that that's a really valuable lesson, because I think some of the things we think about when we think about folks who are, again, coming through the developmental service sector, who are unhoused, who are fleeing domestic violence, it's really easy to make that who they are. And it's really what's happening to them in that moment in time. And their lives are so much richer, and there's so much more to that story. And there's so much potential for that individual. And I think that that really, for me, in terms of significant influence in my young career, I think that was probably the most significant thing. And I hope over the years, if I've passed on anything over the years to students, we have students from all different programs in our agency and always have, because I think one of the things organizations need to do, whether it's an inconvenience or not, is really envelop students and make them feel welcome and have them have meaningful experiences. I know sometimes placement students come from college and university and they get the job of running the photocopier, which is not what we try to ever have our people do. Because you really want them to understand the humanity of the people they're serving and the potential there is for a really great career and a really great opportunity to work with people in the organizations that we have. So I think that, being able to do that has been something that's been really, I think, beneficial not only to myself as a young clinician and then in the role I am now, but also to all of the students who've come through our door who we've said, you know what, see the whole person. Don't just see this little discrete moment in time. See who they are, see what their value and what their humanity is, and that will take you a lot. It helps in terms of being kind of steadfast and having durability. I've been in my role 26 years, and part of that is really having that understanding that this person is a fulsome person and has a great potential, that if we can help them through this transition, they really can have a full life. So.
Just to say something that's different than has already been said, as far as my career path, I've always been drawn to people who are authentic. And I started in church ministry as an assistant minister. From there, I worked at NDSS for a decade as a counselor, and then I'm now over a decade at Ongwanada as their chaplain. And in that time, influences for me in leadership and lessons learned, I think the biggest lessons would be from the people we support at Ongwanada. I came in without any training in the DS sector and was kind of scared. DS is developmental services. So I didn't have a background or education in working with people with disabilities. And I had to learn from, people like Sheila and people who were in the field and watched how they cared and watched how our frontline staff cared and how they communicated and all of that. But the biggest lesson has been from the people with disabilities themselves. They see life in a different way than all of us do. The joy they share, the pure joy and excitement of life. You walk into a room and they're so excited to see you, and joy over everyday things, and have taught me much about love, much about acceptance, and those are good things to be reminded of when you're working with people. I heard on a radio a number of years ago this mother talking about raising her children, and she had a 19-year-old at that time, and they as a family from an appropriate age had made it a priority to every year have a new experience in serving others. So then when her children became 19, 20, they had been to places like Morningstar Mission. They had given to places like Interval House, collecting for women in their community. And so as their children were graduating high school, they had all these experiences that took them out into the community and serving. And what a great learning experience that way. Thank you.
Thank you. As a moderator, I'm going to take some liberties here and just pose a quick question, because you mentioned, Sue, about students, and I know that NDSS requires a certain number of student hours of volunteer work in the community. Is that something that either Bow House and or Morningstar actually have had students from NDSS? And how's that been working? And have you had any sort of aha moments with the students?
We do take students from NDSS. We actually, in the last few years, have even started to do co-op student placements, which has been a transition. We hadn't taken too many high school students into those more intensive roles, but we have in the last probably, maybe as the kids came back to work or back to school. I guess they were already working, but back after the pandemic. And I think, and this is the same experience we have with lots of our students, is that I think the expectation of who our clients are before the students arrive to our door, and who they see our clients as they leave the door, having talked to them, having sat and had lunch with them or breakfast with them, or heard about their lives. I think those are the aha moments, because it's really an opportunity for them to see again the clients as individuals and to hear their stories, and so some of their preconceived notions about who might be staying in our shelters, or what someone, again, we have lots of clients who have complex mental health and addictions needs, who have developmental issues, who have all sorts of things. Who those people are really isn't as they've encountered them in our agency. So that transition from having a stereotypical notion of what this experience will be like to having an actual lived experience where you go, you know what? I really got to know that person's story, and I can see their strength. I can see the victories they've had, and I can see what lies ahead for them. I think that's the aha moment. Is that it's a real transition for them to go from, again, having some idea of what this experience will be like, and I'm sure that's similar to your experience with the students as well, Kevin, to having them have real life experience with real folks that have real stories to tell. That's the most moving part for us.
Yeah, and we have, and so I would like to have more. I would like to have more students. I think that there is a conception that there is a flood of young people coming. I don't know what it's like at Centreville House, but at Morningstar, we might get a couple a year who actually, we would probably see more people coming to fulfill community service hours. And then I would see those types of changes in people who come with all kinds of preconceived notions, and then they meet all kinds of people, and sort of see what the Morningstar community actually looks like, which can be quite surprising to people. It can be both painful and joy-filled all at the same time. And so I do wish actually that more people. So if we have parents and grandparents here, encourage your kids to come, because I'm in a position more than ever before to be able to provide quite a structured experience for people. I used to be on the road, if I wasn't there, we were closed. And now we have 4 staff and 75 volunteers going just about every week. So
I think with that, maybe the onus is on us, and I might date myself with this comment, but NDSS, when I was there, had the guidance offices called People Place. And I believe it's called something else now, probably. But, if we reach out to some of the guidance counselors there and say, these are opportunities, because we used to announce them years ago, and maybe someone looking for their 40 hours or more, you'll always have those students who far surpass their 40 hours in their high school career and have more than 400. There's awards for that. But, maybe we can do it like a posting for an opportunity to get more people your way.
Thank you. Next question, and I'm keeping my eye a bit on the clock, because I want to stay on time, and I'll maybe pose this one to you, Marcus. It's just give you an opportunity to have the first crack at it. How long have you been working in your present field? I think you've kind of addressed that already. And can you perhaps articulate 3 major changes impacting leadership that you've seen happen over that time? And perhaps what changes you're anticipating in the years ahead?
In the time I've been at Ongwanada, certainly the pandemic has affected all of us. But imagine a place where people with developmental disabilities, could not leave their homes, and things were closed down, programs were closed down. And so that evolved in a positive way for us, as positive as that can be, with the use of technology. We had musicians doing concerts on Zoom or, whatever, and things like that. So that's one thing that has definitely changed. For us at Ongwanada, there's been a lot of retirements. A lot of people were hired in the organization in the 80s. A lot of them are retiring. And so there's that change and huge gap, actually, of people who had worked with people for many years. Also, finances. We all know there's cutbacks with finances and changes to things, and any organization faces that. As far as looking into the future, I think that changes will be it becoming more and more normal, or people striving for it to be more and more normal, for our vulnerable populations to be included in our groups, in society on a greater, and involved in a greater level. I do think that different things, they've changed things in the developmental services sector to have passport funds. That's, funds that you have a certain amount, and the person you're serving can choose what they want to do to have that spent, to have support workers and things. So they're putting the sheltered workshops like ARC Industries in days past in this area to having more community events and community participation and things like that. And I think in the future, it's up to our community to take responsibility of what life looks like for people in the vulnerable sector and what opportunities there are there, and in developing opportunities and programs and in welcoming people.
So I think that I have seen, probably all of us up here can attest to this, the value of being able to adapt. That is probably not going to slow down. So I think that the ability for an organization to be adaptable is really important. And I think that we had a vision of kind of what Morningstar should or could be, and then COVID came, and suddenly everything that we thought was the most important thing didn't matter anymore. And we could have held on to that, but we didn't, and we just tried to keep filling gaps, and we just tried to move on and do what we could do, and we are still, and so it changed us, and so we have now are in a position where we're probably, it's easy to say, we're probably four times bigger than we were when we went into COVID. So that presents a bunch of challenges on its own. But I think I'd pick up on Monica's point, which is I never miss an opportunity to remind people that you have to be intentional. If we want to make a difference in the vulnerable sector, then each one of us has a part to play, and that is to be intentional. And so at Morningstar, that could mean any number of things, as little as coming for a meal and just being intentional to see who all is there making up the community and really changing your own attitudes and ideas of what it means to be a vulnerable person, and recognizing all the joys and the pains that people go through. So maybe just leave it at that.
Okay. I think what I've seen over the years has certainly been some change in certainly organizational structures. I was thinking about this afternoon. When I started addiction services, the program ran quite close to the morgue, so it's not always about where you work. in the county hospital. And the ministry in its wisdom decided that organizations needed to be broad-based and embedded in communities. And I almost stayed long enough there that there was some talk of organizations being in a community hub and going back to the hospital. So I think there's always kind of these pendulum swings that we see in terms of funding, in terms of government, in terms of kind of the next great idea of what's going to be. I see right now on the news before I came, great talk of massive public health units again, which will get rid of all of our IPAC meetings, because then we won't have to go to Ottawa for those things, which is infectious disease programming that Kevin and I had to attend periodically during the pandemic. But I think one of the things that's really important in terms of where I hope I see our organizations maintain is really having good embedded community-based roots. Because I think when we look at what's happened to organizations that have amalgamated into kind of broader, bigger organizations, one of the things that gets lost being, I hasten to use the word poor cousin, but I always think that's a good analogy to the urban center, is that we always tend to lose out. So I think that in terms of organizationally, one of the things we really want to make sure is that we have community-based organizations that are embedded in our own communities, providing services to our own people. Because I think, unfortunately, when we don't have that, sometimes I think about our child welfare partners that went from living in a giant building that now houses the town hall to driving around the entire staff team in a minivan. Right, we've really seen the erosion of service, and that really, in terms of vulnerable populations, impacts what their service expectations can be. Because if you don't see your people in your community, in your backyard, and you don't have the same kind of care and concern about those people because they're your people, I think we really suffer loss for our vulnerable population. So I think that would be one of the things in terms of leadership that I hope we maintain as a really solid base of what's left in our community, to make sure that we have those services available for our folks who need them most desperately. Because again, when you outsource some of that out of community, it doesn't always come back in the way you hope it does. I mean, it gets sold differently, that, you know what, we're going to do this and you're going to have, I remember I was part of the conversation about some of the amalgamations, and we're going to have better access to IT and infrastructure and all this other stuff, which really at the end of the day, if you're a client accessing services, matters nothing. Because what matters is that you come into your community, you see the clinician you hope to see in the place where you hope to see them in a way that's meaningful to you. So I think that those are areas where we really need to kind of keep an eye on.
If I can add one thought, and Dr. Sloan, you're an excellent medical doctor, and I appreciate that even in your retirement, you've continued to see people. But something for our vulnerable population with medical needs is many of them don't have a doctor, or they might be on a waiting list for services forever. And we certainly see that in, people with developmental disabilities. And I know many of you might be waiting for a surgery, and the wait for the surgeon is 3 years. Those are things that directly impact our vulnerable populations. And there's pop-up clinics, different places, and those are helpful. But, the family doctor shortage, it's very real. It's very real in Ontario. In our region, you can go to St. Catharines and doctors are taking patients apparently still. But it's something that with the age and retirement and all of that is very much affecting the vulnerable population in a great way.
Well, thank you for raising that issue, Monica. And it's a complex issue. The shortage of family physicians and primary care access in the province is a huge issue, and it's not going to be solved overnight. But I think we're all working on it. The next question is, I think maybe I'll just direct this one to you, Sue. And that is, do you think lobbying local politicians in an organized public appeal would be useful in securing funding to help with the changes ahead?
It's a tough one. Kevin, you want that question? I'm just kidding.
Me too. For a reason.
I think there's always merit to that. I think one of the things that happens when we lobby government is we can speak to what our own community needs are. Right? I think that's the greatest gift in terms of bringing people together from a community to say, this is what is unique about our community, this is what our community experience is, and this is what we need to go forward. And I think that's the meritorious part of that, is to be able to, one, it brings together people, and of course in my sector, we're one of the, well, I guess you'd be as grassroots as we are, but certainly the violence against women sector is a very grassroots, organizationally driven system where community members came together years and years and years ago to say, you know what, this is an issue we need to resolve, we need to get access to shelters, we need to get funding for shelters, we need to get properties bought, we need to get doors open, and we need to get women in places where their lives will be saved and where they'll be safe. And certainly our sector has shown the really intrinsic power of local lobby with government. And I think, you know what, I think whenever you come across a crossroads where you think, I wonder if anybody else knows that this is a problem in my community, one of the greatest things we can do is say to our neighbors, do you know that this is an issue? Do you know that this is an issue? Do you know that this is going on? How can we move this forward? And one of the great things, actually, strangely enough, I think, and if you don't believe it, write your MPP, or your MP, but I know your MPP deals more with your local issues, but write them and see what they say. Because once in a while I fire off a hot email myself because I'll run into something that's gotten under my skin. And you know what? And not because of the position I hold in the world, because I said to Kevin before the meeting started tonight, it's funny that we're executive directors because there's not too much executive function in my job, but you'll be surprised that you'll actually get response. You might not be able to move the needle by, one, angry email, because I'm an angry typer, if anybody can hear that. But, it really is important to figure out, is this just an issue that I'm dealing with, or is this something that other people are seeing, and say, oh, you know what, yeah, I knew that, I heard that, or, I see this, I see, we hear lots right now about the issue of encampments and, kind of the things that are happening with that. Well, collectively, what do people think they want the answer to be? So you find like-minded people to say, this is what we see as a real viable solution to what we're seeing happening in our communities, and this is what we'd like, sent up to Queen's Park. And there's a really great value in doing that, for sure.
I'll pose this question to you. When you think about people you encounter who are working effectively in leadership positions, what are the qualities that they embody, and what do those qualities make possible in their work?
I think a good leader is vulnerable and real. Someone that's willing to roll up their sleeves. They might be in a executive director position, but roll up their sleeves and serve and help. And I think they know their team and know how to work well with others and bring out the best in their team and motivate their team. And I think, they allow room for people to grow. They allow room for ideas that are different than theirs, to hear them out, to maybe try them. And I also think that good leaders are people who learn from their own mistakes and admit to them, admit the failures. They listen, they give feedback, and that they always want to learn. The day when we say we know enough, we don't want to learn anymore, I think we're in trouble. Integrity is a big thing, and big thing to me. And I think of the leaders that I respect the most. Those are the qualities that they have had: a servant leadership style, integrity, and willingness to have your back. I have made mistakes in my career. I don't know if you ever have, but to have a supervisor that will have your back, even when you can admit yourself that you did not handle a situation right, but they still have your back and are there for you, and you can grow together through it. I'm so thankful for the good leaders in my life that have had such an impact on me personally.
Either of you wish to embellish those comments there? great.
You should always try to embellish comments. I think certainly along the same lines, I think certainly folks who have been really impressive leaders for me, the people that have been steadfast in their work. And I think you're quite right, it's not always perfect. The work we do is messy, the vulnerable populations are messy, I'm sure the non-vulnerable populations are messy, I just have never worked with them. But to really just be willing to roll up your sleeves and to say, you know what, we're in this together, we'll figure it out. As you say, to have your back and to have each other's back to say, that didn't go, because again, when you're dealing with humans, they're unpredictable, and you think, okay, we've got a perfect plan, we're going to try this, and this is going to happen, and that's going to happen next. Sometimes it goes like that, sometimes it goes not at all like that, and to be able to be adaptive and to be responsive and be able to go, you know what, I hate to use this word because it got overused in the pandemic, we're going to pivot, we're going to try something different, because that didn't work. Because again, we're dealing with people who are a little bit unpredictable, because people by their nature are unpredictable. But I think that those are really strong leadership qualities in terms of that steadfast commitment to the work and being committed to the work and not just to, I'm committed to the work from 8 to 4 and then my day is done and then I go home and then Saturday and Sunday I do my own thing. I think it's really about how does it's embedded in the fabric of your person and it becomes part of who you are.
I suppose that people can tell if you care.
Sorry, say that again, Kevin?
I said, I suppose that people can actually tell if you care. So it's really actually important to really care about the people that you serve, the work that you do, and the people that are coming along beside you, and not to really take that for granted. And I think that in the sort of the social services field, I don't know in other organizations what that always looks like, but I think that that's what I have seen is that it really, if people think that you care, both the people that you serve and the people that are underneath you, I think that goes a long way.
And if I may take advantage of my position here once again, I'll just say, and I think you kind of suggested that already, Monica, in your comments about trying to be inclusive, bringing people's opinions in from your team, I think is a really important part of successful leadership as well. Because that's been my experience in listening to the voices of your members of your team and acting on things they raise. Thank you again. Next question I'll pose to you, Kevin, to start with. Leaders may be active in staff roles, board roles, and volunteer roles. How do you see these roles differing in the leadership skills and training needed and the contributions that they can make? Tough question.
Well, so they are different, and I think that's okay. And I think that like a board role, you are really trying to certainly in organizations that have a board of directors, it is really helpful to guide the organization if you have recruited people that bring a really needed skill set to the board. And I think that is really helpful. And of course, as Morningstar being a Christian organization on top of that, we're also looking for Christians to fulfill that role too. So that just makes the pool even smaller sometimes too, right? But again, and then, at the staff level, I think we've talked about the challenge sometime. The three of us were talking before this started, and we were chatting about one of the shelters having staff that were quite young, that were really, a lot of them were fresh out of school, and so I think it's really important as leaders to really help to mentor and encourage, to really allow people to make mistakes, and sort of how we correct them is really important. And of course, for me, I am always having to learn because we're sort of doing everything at Morningstar for the first time, right? And so as the leader of that, I get humbled a lot. And so, and I did have a leader once who we made what I would term a mistake that was public in a role that I was playing. And I remember that I thought we were going to get into real trouble. And remember that my supervisor was really upset. And then their supervisor called me in and said, "Isn't it great that the world gets to see, that our community gets to see the challenging people that we work with when we don't just hide them away?" And so that really, first of all, put my mind at ease, allowed me to breathe, and I've never forgotten that. And so I try to bring that sense of like, it's my job to protect my staff, it's my job, I think that we can't make egregious errors, right? But I want people to be able to share their ideas, to take chances within, their role. Anyway.
Did anyone wish to add to that?
I remember once a lawyer saying to an organization that, having a seat at the board and being able to, kind of encourage things that way and look at things from the perspective of a board member versus that would outweigh the value, it would be worth more than a monetary donation to their cause, to have the expertise of a lawyer on the board. And I've often thought about that. And I would not be a good board member. I have great ideas and want to do wonderful things, but the nitty-gritty of finances and looking at that and policies and procedures, you need a certain person. I see many volunteers here today. And if I was to ask you what you spend your time doing and where you volunteer, you would be volunteering in areas that you're passionate about. And so volunteers to have that, that time to be able to give to a cause that you really believe in and you're passionate about is great. And the positive energy that comes from volunteers in all of our places is just exceptional. Whether they're cooking or serving, and the joy they bring is great. And there are differences. In staff members, you want people who are dependable and show up, and people are of integrity and that are the same when their boss isn't there. And one of the challenges now in staff members, you could have somebody starting, this happened in one of our programs last week, a new person was starting, they didn't show up. And you hear that happening again and again, someone being hired or going to interview someone and they don't come for the interview. So those are, strategic planning for board members. That would not be my cup of tea, but aren't you grateful there's people that is their cup of tea and they serve so willingly.
I feel like you and I are on the opposite ends of those things. Those are my favorite things: board governance, strategic planning, financial matters.
You're much smarter than I.
See, that's all. That's my favorite part. I'm a good board member, that's for sure. But I think you're right. I think we are seeing a real significant change in the work world. I think about all the people who do lots of HR work, the people that don't show up for interview, who you say get hired, or you call back to do it. They're like, yeah, I changed my mind. Okay, again, I think it's part of that. How do we foster within? Because we get, I think in all of our sectors we get fresh out of school kind of grads. How do we help people, even in those moments when we're interviewing people, to understand the value of the work, right? And I think one of the things that's really so important, again, is, whether it's a board member, whether it's a staff person, is really trying to match people with the work to make sure that they care about the work and they care about the outcomes and they care about the people who sit before us. And as I said before, and they see it as a real privilege to be in those roles, because I think that's what gets those seats filled, whether it's at the board table, whether it's the staff, staff table, and whether it's at your senior management level. I think that's the hardest thing to ever ascertain when you're interviewing people, is what they see the value of the work to be. Because you don't always know that until you see them in action. Because those actions speak way louder than anything they give you in an interview, so.
Thank you. I think I'm going to skip ahead to question number 9, just in the interest of staying on time. And just to mention also, there are papers and pencils, I believe, in the pews if you want to pose any questions to the panelists. And Jeff here is going to be collecting those in a few minutes. And we'll submit them, and we'll maybe try and get out here a little bit earlier than we had planned initially. Also, I should have mentioned earlier, the washrooms are downstairs if people don't know where they are. And we're going to be enjoying some snacks afterwards as well. People wish to stay and chat a bit afterwards. Question number 9, and I'll pose this to all of you here as well. We'll start maybe with Kevin. Are there any new initiatives in our community to help with the vulnerable that you're aware of? Are there any we could offer our support to? Anything new coming down the line?
Well, so I think that it's, so youth is always really important, and we only would dabble in that, but I think Sue should maybe talk a little bit about the transitional housing that Centreville is doing. I think that maybe the community might not be aware of what's happening there.
Sure. So during COVID, one of the things that happened was talk about, our screw must be a bit loose on this thing, so it wants to just keep coming back to you. There we go. That's out of my range. Excellent. No,
It still wants to rotate.
Anyways, one of the things that happened during the pandemic was that there was some federal money that came down the pipe for housing, because of course one of the things that was apparent for people during the pandemic was you couldn't safely shelter at home if you didn't have a home. So we were able to, during that time period, access some federal funds, and not in our, well, probably in our smartest moment, but maybe not our smartest moment, we purchased a property at 47 Dundas, where the Community Foundation was, and the Chamber of Commerce and all of that on the main floor. And we renovated upstairs into 6 apartments for youth. I say it wasn't very smart because it was really hard to get that stuff during the pandemic, to get drywall, to get windows, to get, like, it was fire door that held us back for 6 months to get the new fire door done. Anyways, but it'll be 2 years this June coming. We opened a new youth and transition housing program. And that program houses between 6 and 8 youth. It depends kind of on the configuration of youth. We have 2 units that are a little bit bigger than the others, so sometimes we can put 2 youth in 1 unit. Excuse me. We sometimes use that unit if we have a mom that has some littles, and we might use the bigger units for a mom with some little kids. But the youth can stay in that program for 18 months. We haven't had any of our youth actually stay past a year, which has been surprising to us. Yes, we said sometimes we do these programs, and we're like, oh, I thought they'd be here for 1.5 years, and we'd be saying, okay, like it's time to go, somebody else needs your spot. But one of the things we've been actually really able to do is get some of those youth into permanent housing. Some of those youth have reconciled with their families and gone back to their family homes. And some of them have gone on to different youth programs as well. We, for all the time I've been in Interval House, have always thought that we needed a youth and transition program. I mean the royal we as a community, not necessarily as Lennox and Addington Interval House. But after 22 years of waiting, I decided that I guess nobody else was going to take this mantle up, so we decided we would take that up. And that's actually where your board is great, because one of the things that has been on our strategic plan is looking at the issue of youth and transition housing. So when the opportunity came along, we were already kind of in the mindset that that would be an option. And for the youth that are in that program, we become a little bit, I don't want to say surrogate parent, but we do kind of fulfill a little bit of that role of kind of finishing the growing up of the kids that are in that program. So while they're in the program, they have to attend school, or they have to be working or doing an apprenticeship or some such thing, which creates a great expectation for them that this is a transition, that you're going to, hopefully finish your high school out, hopefully, stay attached to the workforce, hopefully do the things that you're going to need to move your life forward, so this doesn't become kind of a permanent arrangement for you, but a transition in time. And we've had really tremendous success in the 19 months we've been open in terms of the number of youth that have graduated out of this program. So that's been really exciting for us. On the radar right now is Interval House has the shelter, we have transitional housing, which is an apartment building for moms with kids. We have 2 communal living centers and this youth and transition housing program. And right now we're working on looking at doing a release from custody, because I don't know if anybody follows this, but our Quinte Detention Center has gone from male population to female population. So we're working with their social workers at looking at doing release from custody for women who would otherwise be going home to a violent partner. So we're looking at a new communal living center that will house women who are coming out of Quinte who would otherwise be returning to a dangerous situation. So that's another So again, when we talk about adaptability, one of the things we've tried to do is adapt and figure out where there's little pockets of need. We don't always have a fulsome, perfect plan that's going to solve everybody's problems, but they're little pieces of a plan that are better solutions than no solution at all. So that's kind of what's new on our radar. I bet you we've got that stop now.
As far as supports for people with developmental disabilities, in the last year they've opened up community supports in Napanee at what you will all know what I mean when I say the old Lenadco. So there is an Ongwanada space in there. It's basically a place to come and go from. So the mandate is very much that the people we support would be out in their community. So sometimes they go swimming in Belleville at the wellness center there in Belleville, and doing different things in the community. But one way that you can help is, many of you have hobbies. Many of you have classes, and make those things known to people in the community in the vulnerable sector. Maybe there might be 1 or 2 who might want to participate with you, whether it's music appreciation or art, or if any of you are woodworkers. Some of the young men wanted to do some things with wood, and so they're looking for ways to get people out in the community and socializing with others and having some different opportunities. And there are workers that are in the community that also take people out and do things with them and help others, and it's beautiful when people work together and provide opportunities for people to belong.
Thank you again. Jeff, I wonder if I can ask you to maybe circulate and pick up those questions now. We'll just take a brief little recess while you do that. And the next question, I'll just quote the last question actually, or the great questions, is just about anyone could be here tonight or could watch the video recording of the discussion, perhaps even your successor. Any words of advice, guidance, and encouragement would you have for that person who's going to be in your role in 20 years? So we'll just think about that for a minute or 2 while we collect the questions.
That's exactly it.
Any further questions? Okay. All right. All right. You want to get started on that one? We'll start with you, Kevin.
Yeah, so I do think Sue was reminding me that it's probably worth repeating, that I think that it's important. I wouldn't want the person who took my place to care. If there's one thing that I hope people believe about me, is that I really do care about the people. And so I think that it's a simple axiom, but if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And I think when we're thinking about vulnerable populations, they really matter. And if there is anybody here who has someone in the vulnerable population, that is your son or your grandson or your parent or your aunt or uncle, that you really care about, right? That you want the people who are serving them to care about them the way you do. And so if I could make sure, if I could push a button, I would want the person who takes over from me to see every person who comes through that door as somebody's son or daughter that really matters. They really matter.
Kevin has summed it up well, but I would encourage someone to be passionate about their role and try different things and think outside the box, you know, and just give it everything you've got, be creative, and of course, yeah, care and love people. You'll never regret loving people too much and showing them that you love and care for them.
I probably should have went first, since I'm probably the closest one to going out the door. Just kidding. Wait. But I certainly echo what these guys have said. I think it's really about being committed to the work and really wanting to see positive outcome, and really being able to, again, to really stay focused that this is a moment in time for people. This isn't a life sentence, right? That really, if we can see what can be done in that discrete increment of time that we have people in our midst, and how can we best help them, and how can our leadership move organizations in that direction where we're really thinking about those things. That's what I want the next leader of my organization to also do, because I think that those are really pivotal pieces. Because again, when we start to, it's easy, because I do lots of the number crunching. It's really easy to get lost in the number of direct service hours, the number of clients in this program. It's so easy to lose sight of all of those numbers represent somebody who's a living, breathing human who needs us to be there for them in a way that's meaningful for them. So that's certainly a focus I would like the next leader of my organization to continue on.
Thanks very much. Now the first question that I received here is actually, looks like 3 questions. So I'll break it down into the 3 parts. Maybe we'll pose this one to Monica first. Says, is it fair to say that everyone these days feels some degree of vulnerability, perhaps especially young people, for instance, graduating with significant student debt, high rents and housing costs, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Go grocery shopping and, see the price of mortgages and things like that. How long are people, our young adults, staying at home living with their families because they can't afford to buy a house? So there's the vulnerability of, they say one paycheck away from disaster. But there's also mental health issues and other things with the pressures in our society that have also made people very vulnerable. Yeah.
And maybe I'll pose the second question to you, Kevin. How does this vulnerability, more generalized vulnerability, impact your recruitment of people, especially young people, into your organization?
Well, I think so. I think there is value always in the local. So, for example, I don't think it's. I think it's fair to say that the reason that Interval House has been so successful is that that the leadership is local, right? Like Sue works here, right? Sue has been here. She's not in Kingston, right? Like that makes that makes a huge difference. So I think that with the advent of the warming center, so Interval House was trying to recruit, is probably always trying to recruit young people out of school, maybe from Kingston or Belleville. And I've not ever talked to Sue about this, but I bet it's quite a challenge when she's trying to recruit from Kingston or Belleville to keep people. And so there is a real advantage. And so now with the warming center, that has opened up new people to the field, maybe working midnights or whatever, and working with the vulnerable sector. And there's getting to be more people in our area with experience. Even myself, I have seen, we've hired some young people who who weren't rooted in our community, and after a couple of months moved out of the community to take a different job. Now, we close, and Interhouse is going 12 months a year, but I think it's really important to provide opportunities for young people within our community, because I think these challenges are real, and I think much of the world faces generations living in the same household, and that we've just had the luxury of not having that there is an expectation that you would move out and move on. And I think there are many places in the world where that was never true, and that we may have to wrestle with that. So I think that we can flip that and say there are advantages that if we are recruiting and supporting young people who can stay in this community and really care about this community, that can be really helpful.
All right, third part of that question for you, Sue, is how do you see your work becoming more truly appreciated, not just with words, but in financial support in the years to come?
That's a good question. I always think sometimes that's tied to economic hard times, but I heard yesterday that the provincial government's spending all sorts of buckets of money, not on my sector, but somewhere in the world. I think, you know what, I think the organization has always been able to kind of manage its resources. One, because again, there isn't too much extra flesh in our organizations, which I think is helpful. But I think the community has lots of different ways to give, and it's not something that really is the only way that people can give, because I think that people underestimate some of the other values in terms of whether it's volunteering, whether it's sitting on a board, whether it's, you know, when you clean out your closets or you clean out your pantry, you know, to share those things with women and kids who are going out in the community and starting their lives over. I think that those things are all really valuable, and it's not just about the financial resources. I know some organizations in some urban centers in my sector require that their board members each make like a $2,500 a year donation to the agency, and I'm always quite taken aback by that, because I think certainly people give in various different ways, and we have, you know, sometimes we get a significant donation that comes out of the blue and we're surprised by it and we're happy for it and we're glad to have it, and then other times we have donations of time and treasure that are very different from that, and they mean just as much to the organization. So I don't know if that answers the question.
That's beautiful, thank you. Just a couple more questions. As regards the role of education for future leaders, specifically, are there college or university programs in which you have been able to recruit successful leaders? And do you ever hear, for instance, from St. Lawrence College or Queen's looking for your input? And maybe you want to respond to that?
I know Queen's has a really great school business, and I've taken a few really good courses from there, but I don't know if they've ever called me to say, hey Sue, what do you think about this? They didn't get the memo. That's my strong suit. It's interesting. I mean, we certainly have had I've had over the years lots of different programs that have reached out, but most of them I think have to do with direct service. They have to do with like I've had opportunity to do some training in, you know, whether it's a medical program, whether it's a nursing program, whether it's a social services program, to help folks who are in those fields figure out a little bit about what the face of domestic violence looks like in the practices that they're going into. And I think that that's probably more a place where we intersect with the post-secondary world. I don't know that we do a lot of really great, and I don't mean we, I mean community-wise or, you know, in the world, a lot of great training for leadership. I think leadership sometimes is seen as an innate quality, and sometimes we don't know that it's something that we can actually train people in or that we can educate people in. So I don't know that there's a really significant body of leadership training programs that exist. Apart from there's like a slice of an MBA program here and there that has leadership programming in it, but not really that it would be a leadership program unto itself.
There are some courses from time to time in thinking of education through the United Way. So the United Way has a great website set up and different opportunities that they offer to people from time to time in seminars and in courses for leadership development and in specific areas. And I've also seen things, again, not a whole program, but things offered from time to time at Queen's and St. Lawrence, and it's probably the same at Loyalist. But again, those aren't entire programs, but things to sharpen skills and have a specific purpose.
All right, the last question, which is kind of interesting, it just, I think, is trying to grasp kind of the scope of the needs out there right now, and just give us some idea of the numbers of clients that you're serving, and perhaps what's happening with those numbers in the last months or years.
So I'll start, since the microphone is pointing to me. So one of the really interesting things is that people often want from me trends. What is the trend? And so what they forget was that COVID turned everything upside down. And so Morningstar is, money comes in, what we can do based on what we have. And so when we went in during COVID, we were probably serving at our 2 lunches and 2 suppers and a couple of breakfasts monthly. And then that would have ended, right, when the world ended, right? March 20th, around there was March break of 2020. So by May 20th, probably we were doing 1,500 meals. Well, that was because Sue talked about there was some federal money available, so we used that to buy fridges and freezers and cooler bags, and we started taking meals out. And so we knew we couldn't sustain 1,500 meals, so then we dropped it to 750. And then that built up by demand to 1,000, and then we went back down, and then we back up again. So to give you some numbers, we started to intake people who use our food bank and take takeout meals from us, just from Morningstar, which would be on a Monday and a Friday now. We started counting in September of 2022. We probably had, about 18 months, 700 unique families and individuals who have accessed either of those programs. That does not include anyone who may only use our tax program, or maybe to getting clothing, or maybe coming to our sit-down meals. And so I say that the thousands of people come through Morningstar, and people would be very surprised who all is coming through our doors. And that probably, I say that I think we all know there's a tsunami, an economic tsunami. We just don't know how far it will go inland and how many people will be forced to use food banks. I think we've all seen the numbers. They're enormous. And the precious seniors who are homeless, seniors who are finding themselves financially really struggling. I think that's always heartbreaking to see a senior living in their vehicle. Fortunately, I know that 3 that I have seen in the last probably 18 months. And so, so it's really, I think the warming center, we went off a cliff this year. So last year we averaged probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 8, and we had 9 beds, let's say, 9 pods. We opened the door on night number 1, which would have been November 23rd, to 18. We just did our numbers. We are averaging, I think it's 15 a night who are sleeping at the warming center, and we average about 20 people through the space. So that's the average, which means that we can see upwards of 29 people coming through the space. And so, we've seen a significant increase. And I can't necessarily give you a coherent reason why so many people are coming, but there's lots of factors there.
We have ministry funding, so it's very different.
So in terms of the shelter, it's a defined space. So on average, the shelter sees about 120, sometimes 116, sometimes 130 women a year come through the doors. And depending on the configuration of families, between 50 and 75 kids. So those are the folks who would be in our shelter over the course of a year. In addition to that, we have outreach programs in transitional housing. So we have 41 spots in transitional housing. So over the course of a year, we would see another probably 300 to 350 women in the community, either through the outreach program or through transitional housing. In terms of numbers, one of the things I've been interested, because when I started at the shelter, we had seen 153 women through the doors of the shelter. I just was in the computer yesterday or today. I was consolidating a number today. And we've had 3,496 women through our doors over the last 32 years. And we've had 4,408 kids through the doors. So when you think about the size of the population, it's staggering to think about that number of women and kids. Some people ask, can women come back? Of course women can come back. Do they get a new number? No, so they're not even counted twice. I think it speaks a little bit to how pervasive the issue of domestic violence is in the community, and I think that's one of the things that when our sector started, we thought, you know what, we're going to throw the doors open to these shelters, and we're going to say this isn't right. Women and children shouldn't be, abused and threatened and fear their lives in their homes, and it's going to stop. And 10 years from now, we'll be able to close the doors and turn this place into something else and go on our merry way. We have shelters in this province that have been operational for 60 years. And you know what? Unfortunately, we're not getting across that road. We don't seem to be making that much headway. But in the interim of that, we're still providing places of safety and saving women and children's lives. So not the job we thought we signed up for, but that seems to be the job we're in now. So it's unfortunate that that's still something that still exists in our community and that we're still doing to provide safe shelter, but it's still something that is still very much needed on an every night basis. Our shelter is mostly always full. We have a huge, a 6-bed family room, so we'll get families from outside of our jurisdiction, because if a mom's got 5 kids, they end up in our shelter because we have actual physical space for them. But there really is a tremendous need still.
Well, perhaps we'll bring this to a close on that kind of sobering note. I just wanted to thank all of you, our panelists tonight, for your wonderful contributions to this conversation that we've been having. Thoughtful preparation for the questions that we prepared, and for the challenges that you have posed to us as a community to support the vulnerable, and also to encourage our young folks and others to become leaders in this area. So I also want to recognize our little committee that organized things, especially Rosie Hyde. You want to stand up, Rosie? Rosie prepared most of the questions and did a lot of the organizing. But also Carol Hardy over there preparing our refreshments. Jeff Hart here, who has also helped with the planning. And also to Bill upstairs there, who's been running the audio and helped set up and does so much for this church. We're so grateful for Bill and all that he does with his wife Valerie in helping us. And also for the support of our minister, Reverend Barbara, and her husband. And for all of you who've come out and given up your night. Oh, for Ken, of course, also, for who's recording this, it's going to be available on YouTube. So if people want to refer this to their friends and family members that weren't able to come tonight, it'll be there. Anyone else that I forgot?
Yourself, Jeff.
Yes. It's been a pleasure for me to be here with you this evening and to get to learn a bit more about what you do and the people you serve. And I'd like to take some time here now just to enjoy some refreshments and some casual conversation. And thank you all for giving up your time in this busy week. And also we have, in the pews, we have some feedback forms for you, if you wouldn't mind, if you have a few comments, to scribble those down for us so that we can plan more effectively for our next event. So thank you again for coming. And Rosie would like to make a presentation to our panelists.
It's been so exciting preparing for this evening, and we just appreciate so much that you were able to take the time and talk with us. You've talked about possibilities and about challenges, and we appreciate it. And there's a small token for you. And I hope you enjoy the refreshments.
Thank you.